this is the first year ever that Juneteenth is being kind of just widely celebrated. Like my employer actually started giving us as a company holiday off, which was really cool. But for Juneteenth, we partnered with about 9 different Black-owned businesses here in Chicago to put on a series of really virtual donation-based programs. So there were some fitness classes. We had some, Instagram story takeovers with the likes of like the Silver Room, showing a few different Black-owned brands that, they use. We had some really great talks around the power of the Black dollar. They're all on our Instagram page, but the idea of it was to build a community fund for these businesses where 100% of the proceeds would be evenly distributed. And kind of the heart around that is, and we'll talk about it a bit later, but we saw even with COVID and the PPP funds, a lot of minority-owned businesses weren't really able to get the help that they need. And we figured, how about we help them, as a community? So we wanted to take that time to celebrate Juneteenth, but also, again, put our money where our mouth is and help these businesses recover from COVID and even, pursue their own social impact causes. So that's Refine, that's Juneteenth, that's me.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Ivy. I know I just met you recently, and our attendees are, just met you, but I just want to acknowledge, all the amazing things that you've done just in these past few months. I mean, you started a whole organization, an online community, but also created a week-long fundraising event, and it was full of speakers, and I checked some of those out, and that takes a lot. And I know for your fundraiser, I saw that you raised thousands of dollars for Chicago Black-owned businesses, and this was all while working a 9-to-5 job. So, talk about making those boss lady moves, and really just wanted to emphasize that and really celebrate that. So for folks that are attending, definitely connect with IB. She's doing some amazing things. And as she was talking about, yes, snaps, virtual claps, everything. Let's celebrate that. But also, as Ivy mentioned, she was fundraising events on GoFundMe last week. That GoFundMe is still live. I think one of our board members is going to drop that in the chat. So we'll be making that plug throughout today's discussion, but definitely check it out. And if you can please donate, even if it's $5, every bit helps. It's, as Ivy mentioned, it's going to be helping Chicago Black-owned businesses who've been struggling right now. So please definitely check it out. But shifting the conversation a little bit, we do have a few questions that we'd like to ask you before we jump into our live Q&A from our audience. But I'm seeing a lot of engagement in conversation on the chat box, so definitely keep that up throughout. But kind of jumping right in, Ivy, the first question that we have is, when we talk about the history of Black-owned businesses in the U.S., why is it so important to know and understand what happened with Black Wall Street and Seneca Village, especially for folks who are on this call, wanting to learn and to be allies?
Yeah, I think it's really important to really know the history. I think a lot of times, like in the Black community, like we know, or like everyone knows about slavery, right? Like a lot of times Black people are a little, we were set behind because of slavery, but in terms of like building businesses and building for ourselves, there have been things that happened historically in the United States that have really set us behind. Like you mentioned, Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma in the 1920s. It actually started off as there was an alleged rape of a white woman by a Black man, and that kind of turned into 2 days of massive riots where Greenwood District also, which was known as Black Wall Street, where Black business was really flourishing. Black people were employing themselves, keeping and these were affluent people, right? We say that we get to the spot where we're making for our own, and they had that, and there were, I think, like almost 40 city blocks burnt down, 300 people passed away, and even though there were some short-term attempts at scholarship funds, the concept of Black Wall Street was basically gone just from there. So that's just an example of Black folks trying to, you know, get to that point. You grow up and tell you, you know, go to school, start your own businesses, and you do that, and, you know, that's taken away from you in a blink of an eye, right? And Seneca Village, another big thing in that we try to, you know, aspire for, the American dream, is to be property owners. And what we know today as Central Park in New York, actually in the 1850s used to be about majority neighborhood of Black people, where most of them were property owners, and and that was built over, and, you know, those people were dispersed and their properties were taken from them. So I think a lot of the times it's just really important, because I think sometimes, you know, Black people and also people not in the community, sometimes people get jaded by the, you know, we have to start 10 steps behind, and you hear the same things because of slavery, because of, you know, Jim Crow, but we don't think about these specific instances that have actually set us behind, and kind of set a precedent that, you know, we're not supposed to have our own, we're not supposed to, you know, be business owners and stuff like that. And I think it's just really good to remember the history that comes with that.
No, thank you for sharing that. I know for me as well, that's, you know, part of the history that I didn't know until recently. And, you know, it's really surprising to me. And I think, you know, to your point and to amplify what you said, it's really important to understand that. You know, when we were talking about this conversation and putting these questions together with my board, someone had brought up, you know, there's sometimes when you have like the opposing side, whatever that means, you know, kind of say like, well, why don't Black people, you know, like, why can't they build successful businesses or model something similar, like Jewish folks who, you know, build really successful communities? And it's like, you look at these examples and it's like, well, they have, and they've tried, you know, and it's really like white supremacy and, you know, systematic racism at play, and, you know, keeping Black folks from building that generational wealth. So definitely encourage for, you know, folks to definitely look more into these things if this is the first time that you're hearing about that. The next question, it's a very similar question, and you've touched a little bit on it, but building off it, what are other challenges Black business owners have encountered and are still encountering today? You can just talk about some of those.
Yeah, I think some of them are pretty just kind of practical. Like when you think of, and I'm sure like other people, like people of color, a lot of times, like we don't grow up we don't grow up knowing people, right? And a lot of the times, as professionals, we all know, like a lot of times it's not what you know, it's who you know, you know? So kind of just the environments that we're brought up in, and kind of the lack of resources. Like I can even speak for myself, like, you know, learning about home ownership and stuff, like these are things that I've had to kind of educate my parents on, not my parents educating me on, you know? So it's just like, a lack of knowledge to just kind of what we were brought up as. Second of all, I do think that, and it's been proven multiple times, like you can look up yourself, just denied bank loans and the racism in the system itself. Like you need capital. So if you don't come from money, you know, if you don't have, you know, money passed down to you, if you don't have property, any type of capital passed down to you, you go to the banks. And there's a whole bunch of discrimination that you find there, trying to, not even just a bank loan, you know, taking out a line of credit, you know. And I think even when it kind of just stops you at that point, right? It kind of makes you give up your hope. And then, and we talk about even today with COVID and in this firsthand with, you know, the PPP loans and these government protection loans, like, you know, those weren't built for mom and pop shops, especially Black and brown owned businesses. Like those are built for the Ruth Chris's of the world, you know, and the Potbellies that went and, you know, basically monopolized those loans. So when you think of it, even in today, and we're all like kind of like COVID is the center of our world right now, even those that were able to build those businesses and start them, like they are not afforded the same privileges as everyone else in terms of help. So those are just like three just off the back, just of like getting started, right? Like we just don't grow up with that knowledge, and to get the capital, it's not readily available for us. Or, you know, a lot of the times you can think of it as just like anything in your own world. When you try once and you've been like
Mhm.
aggressively denied, and like you're not going to want to do that again, and you're not going to want to encourage the people in your world to do it again, you know. So it's kind of just never ending cycle of
Mhm.
rejection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely challenging. And, you know, I think too, as we, you know, we heard these challenges, you know, that, you know, Black business owners encounter. I think that's so important, you know, even on just this call, we have folks from a bunch of different industries and, you know, some folks work in the government, some folks, you know, in the vesting space, supplier diversity. I think that's why it's so important to like understand these challenges so then you can better be an ally and advocate and try to, you know, really bring down some of those barriers that are real and people just don't know about. So thank you for sharing those. Um, the next question is, so a lot of people don't know and understand the huge impact that buying Black has in the Black community. So Ivy, can you just please tell us about why it's so important to prioritize buying Black and really supporting Black owned businesses?
Yeah, definitely. I think that a lot of it also comes with like, we could talk about like on the economic side around,
Mhm.
you know, it really helps with closing that economic gap and the racial wealth gap that
Mhm.
we see in the US. Especially when like, you know, like everyone we'll see like a lot of us, not a lot of us, but everyone doesn't take the college route, right? Like, you know, so
Yeah.
it really just affords people to be able to build and grow wealth in their communities. And for me, and this is just from my opinion, like why it's really important to support Black owned businesses is because of the community that comes with it. And it was actually like extremely highlighted to me last week during Juneteenth, and just working with different Black owned businesses. Like they're not just doing this for them. Like when you go
Mhm.
into a Grail Cafe, and this is
Yep.
a Black owned business or coffee shop in the South Loop, even though that's in Printers Row, right in the middle of downtown, like
Mhm.
they have like Black and brown kids from the South and West sides employed there. Like there are a lot of kids who have grown up in Chicago their entire lives in these neighborhoods and have never
Mhm.
even been downtown. So now
Mhm.
you give them the opportunity to be able to, you know, see this other world and also like learn business and, you know,
Mhm.
build skills that the classroom will never teach them, you know? And it's just so, I've seen firsthand so many businesses, especially in Chicago. Like I'm actually in Iowa right now,
Mhm.
visiting a good friend, and we went to this not coffee shop, the smoothie shop, and it was Black owned, and it was nothing but maybe like 14-year-old young Black kids like with dreads, like working the register. Like where are they going to get experience? Like
Yeah.
are like, do you think Starbucks is going to hire them with their locks in their like in their hair? I think it's just a really great opportunity to really like lift as we climb. Like it's you're giving opportunity
Mhm.
to these kids, and they're able to use that, and you know maybe one day they can run this business or start their own. And I think it's just really important to remember, like you're not just putting money in the business owner's hand, you're putting money in their communities hand, and you're putting resources and you're putting visibility into their hands. So that to me is kind of like the most important, because I'm sorry, like a lot of, you know, larger corporations are not going to give our youth the same
Mhm.
opportunities as people within our own community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you for sharing that. No, I love everything about that. And I think it's so important. And you answered the next question. It was, you know, really talking about, you know, we see a lot of these Black owned businesses, especially in communities that are really, you know, purpose driven and really lifting up their community. And, you know, it's so important to identify those and really support those as well. The next question is, so we talked a little bit about the history of Black owned businesses, the importance of, you know, why we need to support them. But, you know, folks might be actually asking now, like, how do I actually do that? You know, what does that look like? And so, Ivy, can you talk to us about, you know, what does it mean to buy local, you know, adopt this local buy minority owned business mindset, and how can, you know, us as consumers change our buying habits? I know that's a lot in just that one question, but I think, you know, we were talking, you know, in preparation for this, we talked about, you know, it's important to understand that, you know, there needs to be a mind shift to happen for us to truly support these businesses.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like first just like acknowledging like the whys. you know, like, you know, if you're just doing something because of it's a fad and everyone's
Mhm.
buying black right now, like you might do it for a week or two, and then once your Instagram timeline looks a little different, you're gonna
Yep.
change your buying behavior. So
Mhm.
like really be honest with yourself and understand like the whys that you want to make the shift, and like make it like just start like within yourself first. Just like this is
Mhm.
something that I want to change, not for the long term. And then I think that in terms of developing a kind of a culture of buying local and buying minority, you can I I don't think it's like you have to be realistic with yourself.
Mhm.
One thing that's just like really practical is look at your credit card
Yep.
statement. Look at like what are your reoccurring expenses?
Mhm.
For example, like what are your reoccurring expenses? And then you have to be willing to do the work, to do the research, and say, okay,
Mhm.
let's see. I'm getting coffee every day, literally every single day. Like, is there a black or brown or minority owned coffee shop within half a mile of my
Mhm.
regular coffee store? Boom, you're already putting
Yep.
$30 a week into someone else's hands. Another way that I think is just like we don't think about, especially in this room with a lot of professionals, and a lot of people in supplier diversity, is like take a look at your break room at work
Mhm.
and take a look at your coffee. Like ask procurement, ask purchasing, who is our vendor for coffee? Like who is our vendor for these random things that we use, and maybe challenge the status quo, especially if your company's out here putting out statements. This is the time, this
Mhm.
is the time to hold them accountable, right? Like,
Exactly.
to just like, it's starting small. I don't think that like, and then as you just start seeing like these individual purchases,
Mhm.
you're they're just going to keep adding on. And like someone just said, the Postbank Chicago Promise, like I've been to a few of y'all's events and I think it's pretty incredible. Like even from caterers, like you guys make it a priority to try and support like brown and brown owned businesses, and I think that's really
Mhm.
important. So I think it's just like not overthinking it,
Yeah.
honestly. um we all buy stuff, like we
Mhm.
all buy stuff, and I'm sure like there's like especially look at your Amazon recent
Yep.
purchases. Like look at your Amazon orders and
Mhm.
say, did I really need to buy that book from there, or could I go to semicolon
Yeah.
like down the street and pick it up same day? So
Mhm.
yeah, just don't overcomplicate it, and see where it starts small and then it'll just pick up from there.
No, that's great. I think, yeah, sometimes when we think about these things, we want to make these big goals or shifts, and then that isn't realistic. And so I saw someone put in the chat box too, but I really love the idea about, looking at your credit card statements, your bank statements, and try to see from there, like, what are the things that, you're spending money, and, what research, that you can do as a consumer to see if you can support a local or Black owned business. So that's
Yeah,
great
and
advice.
I'm guilty of it, girl. Like I like
It's hard.
because it like sometimes it's just like it's easy, right? But then it's like, man, it's like if I get that book one day late, like because Amazon is not going to deliver me in a day, like, am I really
Mhm.
going to buy that book? Am I going to start reading that book? Like,
Exactly.
like having like a sense of grace for yourself too. But
Yeah.
just yeah, everything is not as urgent. I think we
Mhm.
go to Amazon and think we need something tomorrow, and like it's really not that. It's not that deep.
Yeah, and I recently canceled my Amazon. I was thinking the same thing. I was like, well, I'm not gonna get my stuff like in a day or two now. And like to your point, most of the stuff I don't really need. I could wait for it. So that's a great point. Um, I want to be mindful that that we get. I know folks have a lot of questions. So I'll ask one more question, and then we'll shift to the live Q&A. But and you already touched on a lot of great examples and tips. But what are those 2, 3 things that you advise our audience to do to support Black-owned businesses, especially if they're just starting out? And I know you just shared a few, but if there's any other ones that kind of stand out.
Yeah, I mean, I think as simple as like even sharing on social media, um, like eh, tagging businesses, like just
Mhm.
getting, especially like lately, like we see like just the power of social media.
Yeah.
I think even if you're not in the financial position to start changing your
Mhm.
buying behaviors, like there's nothing like sharing a business doesn't hurt. Like it really does make a difference. And I would say like that's definitely one, just like using your platform. I said this before, but I do think, especially in a room of professionals, like this is the time to start challenging our employers on what our vendors are looking like, and not
Mm-hmm.
even just traditional copy or coffee vendors, like professional services. Like, who are you pulling in to do your consulting work? Like, who, like, who are you doing? Like, what accounting firm are you looking at? Because there are many Black-owned accounting firms or minority-owned accounting firms. Like, this is really the time to really start challenging corporate America, because as much as we are like consumers, like we have a huge buying power, but the B2B is massive. And I think that if we can get them on board too, to really start diversifying their sellers, it could be a big game changer for our community. And I think a lot of the reasons, they just don't have a seat at the table, like, you know, to have conversations. And those of us that are in our companies and that are allies, I do think it's our responsibility to at least bring these conversations when we can. And another way, I mean, use Refinecltv and find
yes, plug it in, shameless plugs.
Yeah, and next time you're looking to I don't know, get your, well, let's say next time you need a photo shoot, like, or you need like Prospanica board needs to get new headshots, and you want to look at photographers and studio space, like there's a platform out there for you to find them. So yeah, I would say those are my three.
No, all those were great. You know, some of the questions we asked people who registered to ask questions, and you answered two of those in just that, you know, statement. I think one of the questions was like, you know, if you can't contribute financially or you don't have the budget, how can you still support and promote and amplify Black-owned businesses? And I think, to your point, leveraging social media is a great way to do that, resharing, tagging. And then two, corporate America too, you know, even just for me, there's so much money in contracts that go into, you know, not only to getting speakers, even, you know, for me in the diversity inclusion space, we spend a lot of money on speakers and making sure that, you know, those speakers are, you know, diverse, and, you know, that money's going, you know, local and going back to the community, I think is so important. So those are all great tips, and I see people agreeing with that. So thank you. And so wanting to shift to the live Q&A, and so I think folks, you should be able to go on the more or the reaction. I can't see it on my end, but you should be able to raise your hand. So if folks have questions, please raise your hand, and I'll get notified. And so I'll just call on you, and then you can unmute yourself. So let's see if we have any. Haven't got any notification. Ooh, okay, so I got one. Let me see. I think I have to scroll down. Let's see.
Hi,
okay. Melanie. Oh, I can say my school, sorry.
Hi, Ivy. Hey girl, hey. So I think what you shared was great. I guess my one question, because I know convenience was one thing that you brought up, but what are some other like misconceptions about minority or Black-owned businesses or women-owned businesses that may hinder people from going? Because I know you did some data collection of why people weren't buying from those businesses.
Yeah, people are really snobby, just kidding. No, a lot of people are like, there is a misconception that minority-owned businesses have, you know, lower quality products and or services. And my kind of take on that is like, what do you think? Like, why would you think that they may not be, you know, top tier compared to your regular? And I'm not saying that you should, you know, lower your expectations in terms of quality, but, you know, maybe this coffee shop doesn't meet your perfect aesthetics because they didn't, you know, have the capital to start it, and they use their like as your Starbucks would, you know. And I think that a lot of the times, like, there is a certain level of, like, for lack of a better word, grace that I think we should have with folks. And I think it's just like having an open line of feedback. Like if you had a bad experience, and I think a lot of times we're harsher on Black and brown folks, even as Black and brown folks, right? Like, how many times have you walked into a Pete's or a Starbucks and they've messed up your order and you've gone back to Pete's or Starbucks? But if you go to, you know, the Jamaican spot around the corner and they mess up your order, now you never want to go there again. And it's like even questioning ourselves, why are we so much harder on our own? And I'm specifically speaking to like Black and brown folks in the room. I don't know the white experience, but like I would say like from us, like I think that there is just a certain like level of expectation that's not necessarily fair that we need to kind of acknowledge. And I think that you should give feedback. If you think that like this business could do better in some way, like find a way to give constructive feedback. Like people have no problem tweeting the like tweeting at these different companies. Like, why don't you like slide in their DMs or tweet them like, hey, I had this really rough experience or the wait was really long. Like, would really appreciate it if you guys focus more on customer service. I think feedback goes a long way. But if you just go ghost and silent and don't tell them, like, how are they going to improve, right? And if anything, like, I think feedback from your own, like, goes a long way, you know? So yeah, I think it's just, that's a really big misconception. And for me, I don't necessarily agree with it, because even in like, in my opinion, like Black and brown people, we really shape the culture. And a lot of our products, they're unique. They come from us. And like, I can't like there are things, there's jewelry, there's services that I can get from Black and brown businesses that I can never get from a larger, you know, majority white corporation. And I think also looking at like this is a one of a kind, you know, service or good that I'm getting, like, or like even like the environment, like going to like a semicolon bookstore, like it's not the same as going to Barnes and Noble, and just honoring that and being like, wow, like this is kind of a privilege in a kind of way to be able to go into somewhere and feel seen. And even if you're not in the community, to see another part of another culture. And I think we need to kind of start shifting our thinking around that, in my opinion.
Thanks, Ivy. And the only thing I would add, because we've had these conversations, is I think us as people of color and just part of these communities have to like check ourselves too, because we're real quick to ask for a discount or something for our own people, but we wouldn't do that for like a corporation. So just really being able to be wanting and willing to pay that top dollar for even small businesses and vendors that we use.
Perfect. I see people responding to that. They're agreeing. Any other questions? Definitely raise your hand. I know Cindy message is the best place to stay on top of all that Refinecltv is doing on your Facebook, or would it be IG?
Yeah, I would say Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Facebook is there, but
Instagram is key. I know. Any questions? Definitely just unmute yourself. I mean, we have a list of questions that were submitted, so we can start with those if folks don't have anything.
Yeah, I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, IB, how you doing? Congrats on everything you've been doing so far, and thank you for agreeing to do this. Really appreciate it. One thing I want to know, yes, the promotion of all these small businesses and minority-owned businesses is great, but sometimes their counterparts don't get the same assistance, and they don't have a network as minority-owned businesses don't have the same network or same assistance as their counterparts. Is that something? How can we address that? Right? Are there organizations that help you out with that? And second question is, what does Refinecltv 2.0 look like?
Wow, these are two of the same questions, Alex. Wow, amazing. Not the same, but same answer. So the bigger vision for Refinecltv is to actually kind of 2.0, come September-ish, is to actually launch a community portal for these businesses to be able to have kind of open access to each other, and also, you know, providing events and small business resources where they can collaborate. I know there's a few different, like, I don't know if there are any business owners or women-owned businesses. There's an organization called Bossy Chicago that does something similar, but it's specifically only, you know, for women and only in Chicago. But I think that I'm really excited for Refine 2.0 in the fall, because I think a lot of times, like, people just don't even, like, within ourselves, not even just having access to the larger corporations, like, there's just so much power, so much knowledge that we can really glean from each other when we have access to each other, but there isn't necessarily a portal right now. And I've done my research that really meets that requirement. I know that there are a few, like, a lot of times it's like directories that people find, but I've, like, even through Refine Collective, I've had countless businesses being like, I would love to, you know, connect with these businesses. So I'm really looking forward to provide that platform for people to do that. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if any day I searched them and then I was like, well, I guess I'll create one.
No, that's awesome. I mean, I feel like you just got 31 fans that are going to be supporting you, you know, along your journey, and we're really excited to help in any way we can and champion that.
Ticket Falcon is on there, actually, I think, Mel.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can take that as like an action item for us to check it out and make some recommendations as well. I see Maria, you raised your hand. Do you have a question to ask?
I do. Will you eventually be including service providers such as optometrists, dentists on your site?
Yeah, I actually do today. So there are a few dentists and yeah, so service providers are free game. And if for some reason, like, when businesses are signing up, they're different categories. If for some reason, like, they don't see theirs, they can just, you know, send us an email and we'll add the category. We definitely got pills and smiles in there.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay, we have a few other questions here, people. We have Ashton.
Yes, Mika, you all see me?
Yes.
Hey, this is Ashton, CEO of Ticket Falcon. I just want to say, one, I appreciate what you all are doing. And two, you know, I sit on the board of directors for the National Black MBA, and I want to say that I think what you're doing is serving as an example of what organizations should be doing in uniting folks. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to say thank you for this. And in terms of Refinecltv, I think that what you're doing is pretty awesome, right? Because when you think about the value of the Black dollar, I mean, there's so many words I could use, but it's very powerful. And so your ability to unite that to make change for women and minority-owned businesses, I think, is extremely powerful. So I'm curious on if you're thinking about any other partnerships with organizations that could help you to further accelerate what you're doing with, you know, either Prospanica here locally and nationally, as well as other organizations, whether it be National Black MBA, the Urban League, and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of just, like, open to having these conversations and learning more about what's available. So definitely open to it. Haven't thought too deep on it because I decided to launch during a time that everybody wants to support minority-owned businesses. But I'm definitely very open to it. And yeah, hit me up if you want to talk.
Yeah, I sent you a message, so you'll just have to go back through. But yeah, let's chat about that because I could definitely probably help you. And one thing I do want to add too is I think that you talked about the PPP as well, but for other business owners on the line, this is the prime time to be taking advantage of business plan opportunities. I mean, I can name 3 or 4 competitions that are, you know, $50,000, $60,000. So keep that in mind too, but we can definitely collect offline or connect offline.
Sure.
Thank you so much for joining, Ashton. Really excited to hear from you and making those connections already. I love it. That's what we're here for. So love to see that happen. We have a question from Ram.
It's Ram.
Ram.
Yeah, or Shushmita Ram. But yeah, IB, I really want to thank you for your voice. I also want to thank Patty. She's the one who's been promoting this, and that's how I got connected. I just want to say, like, so much appreciation. And secondly is I'm a teacher in North Lawndale, and I'm also a special educator, and we teach majority Black and Brown students. And I noticed, like, one really challenges that as a school we face is finding internships for our students. And so I'm wondering, as like we are focused on, you know, making sure we are buying like Black, but also like providing jobs for our young and our youth, especially like a lot of times, like, because I help my students like write their cover letters and resumes, is I notice like a lot of times my students with disabilities, it's also really hard to get access jobs based on like making sure they have their accommodations within the workforce. So if like you recommend anything, that would also be great. But also I was gonna put in the chat, there's like a list of like, we work at Noble, but there's like a list of like specifically family owned Black and Latino owned businesses that if you want food, our students are there too.
That is so great, Robin. Thanks for joining it. Actually, your school in North Lawndale, Rebecca, I see you in here. Rebecca, I used to serve on UCAN. I don't know if you've heard of UCAN Chicago. Yeah, so Rebecca's on here from UCAN. I hope it's the same Rebecca. But I used to serve on the auxiliary board there, and maybe, and I can send you my email. It may be a really good organization to connect, especially in North Lawndale, just around like, you know, maybe some job opportunities, or like even like, you know, any type of like there's so many programs at UCAN that really get kids ready, just even with the basics of on like going to a job interview and stuff like that. So we can connect. I can give you that information, but that is actually a really good opportunity maybe in the future for Refine to, you know, partner with these businesses on some type of internship program. But off the top of my head, UCAN is what came up first, especially since you're in that community. And I think Rebecca just dropped something in the chat for you.
Perfect. So we have, I think, time for 2 more questions, if anyone wants to ask. I know some were asked in the chat, so if you want to unmute yourself to say them, I'm trying to scroll back, but it's lagging.
I see one around how does politics affect Black-owned businesses, and what can we do to get more involved and acceptable? Or yeah, acceptable. I'm not a big political whiz, especially today, and I would say, like, I mean, we can take a look at, like, I was really very much following what was going on with the paycheck protection program. And it's kind of like politics is all about who you know, right? So like the bigwigs, like they had their friends at Ruth Chris, you know, sign up or like apply for these immediately. And by the time it was ready, like the mom and pop shops weren't ready. So they obviously impacted. It's all about who you know. And I'm not, I try to stay, I'm not a big fan of politics. It's just as a whole. So I'm sure they impact it. That's the first way I can think of. I mean, how we can impact is getting out there and voting. Like that is just like very simple, not just for the presidential elections, but our local elections. Vote for people who you think will do right by your businesses. If you know, vote for people who have like talked about maybe some programs or workforce development within specific communities, or that are avid supporters of these businesses, and make it a point. So to me, it's just voting. I'm not a big political whiz though.
I think that's such an important thing, and, you know, re-emphasizing to, you know, get out there and vote, especially at the local level. We do have a question from Chicago Latina Moms. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Isa. I'm the founder of Chicago Latina Moms, and it's so awesome to hear directly from you about the work that you're doing. I started following you guys and like getting to know you, so this is exciting. And Chicago Latina Moms, in the month of May, because of COVID-19, we had a virtual pop-up for Latina mom-owned businesses. And it was very successful, and it was really beautiful. And it was only for the month of May. And we realized there's a lot of logistics that we need to take care of in order for it to grow and in order for it to be sustainable. And so we're already like getting the ball moving on, you know, creating like focus groups and creating like how we can not just have a directory, but programs to help the moms.
Yeah.
And it's been like my philosophy for a long time. Like, if you're going to buy something, support like a business of color, you know, or a woman. And yesterday I was listening to basically a recording where Malcolm X said that like when you give your money outside of your community, you're making that community richer and your community poorer. And that was like the quickest, fastest way where it kind of encapsulated everything that like I've been like thinking about and trying to strive for. So my question to you is like, do you have plans, or do you already partner with organizations or nonprofits? Because I would love, you know, for us to do the work and for us to have like a CLM owned business directory, but also like be able to fold all of that into, you know, something like Refine, and have, you know, our, you know, Latina moms be part of your directory as well? Or is that a plan, or are you already doing something like that?
So we literally just launched May 29th. So I have no plans, girl, but I'm always down to talk and see how I could be a resource. Even I'm kind of technical in nature too. So even, you know, helping you guys figure that out or how we can collaborate, I'm always down to hear. And it sounds like it's really awesome what you guys do, especially like we be forgetting about the mamas sometimes. So I think it's so cool to like focus on them and seeing how you can build those businesses. So yeah, I'll drop my email in the chat and let's talk. And yeah.
Perfect. So I'm loving all these questions, but definitely want to be mindful of time, and definitely encourage folks, you know, to follow up with IB. I don't know, IB, if you want to share your contact information, or, you know, folks can contact you via your IG. But definitely want to shift to closing out our event and handing it over to Liz for our call to action for all of our attendees. But before I do that, I want to, you know, see if IB, if you have any last parting words before we get handed over to Liz.
I have nothing crazy to say. I just think let's just all do our best to try to be mindful. I think that right now, like, everyone's really amped up, but we want to see this energy, you know, 6 months, a year, a decade down the line. So let's, you know, run this like a marathon, right? There are different ways that we can fight this fight. And I do think like putting our money is in the hands of Black and Brown owned businesses is another form of activism. But again, it's a marathon. You know, be kind to yourself and give yourself some grace, but hold yourself accountable. And that's what I'm trying to do for myself. And I hope that you guys can do the same, but that's it.
Love it. Thank you so much. And before we go, I just definitely want to echo our whole board's sentiments, and I'm sure all our attendees. Thank you so much for, you know, being here with us, giving us your time and wisdom. We definitely really appreciate it. And, you know, just want to give you a virtual round of applause. So really, you know, this has been great. And yes, everyone's applauding. But no, thank you so much. And, you know, I'm sure we'll be collaborating very closely and following your journey. So thank you. But with that, I'll hand it over to Liz.
Thank you both. That was such an incredible conversation. I know everyone has enjoyed it. I don't think I have anything more to add. Karina did it well. IB, you guys hit it all on the head. I want to remind everybody in the chat section, Melanie did post the link, so it should be very easy for everyone to donate. If you have the opportunity, make sure you follow all of us on the social media, not only Prospanica, but of course IB and her page on Facebook, Instagram. Just again, we thank you, and we just want to say be well and be kind, and we hope to see you at our future events. So have a good night, you guys. Thank you so much.